Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. Bex here today to talk about some books that I would really like to reread in the near future. One of my goals for 2021 that I talked about in my reading and channel goals video was wanting to reread some books. I highlighted some specifically in that particular video, but I wanted to use this video to expand on that. I'll start by talking about the books that I mentioned in my goals video and then expand from there. Some of these are technically series, so I have 10 different books or series to talk about. The book that is at the top of my list to reread this year is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I did not own a copy of this book until very recently when I filmed my goals video. I didn't even have this yet. I have since ordered one of the Penguin English Library editions, which I absolutely love. I love the way they look on the shelves. I love the covers. So, I originally read this book for AP Literature in high school. So it's my senior year, my last year of high school, and I really enjoyed it at the time. I really liked the entire experience that this book gave me back then. So I'm hoping I get it again this time, rereading it for the first time in 11 years. Yeah, 11 years. But, and I have this beautiful edition to do that with. The other books that I have previously mentioned are all part of the same series, and that is the Chronicles of Narnia series. I have this beautiful box set that I was given for Christmas a number of years ago, and I really want to actually read these editions now. I originally read this series, I believe I read it all when I was 9, so in 4th grade. My teacher had the books in the classroom, and I think I just started picking them up and going through them. I'm looking forward to experiencing this series again as an adult. I think I will definitely pick up on some different things. I'm not going into this from a religious perspective or anything like that. It's more just that fantasy adventure side of things and seeing how I feel. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the movie that came out in the mid-2000s, holds a really special place in my heart. It's definitely nostalgic for me, so I think it'll be interesting for me to read that book in particular because I have such a movie memory of it, and then to go back to the original text and see where it differs will be interesting. Third on this list is In the Woods by Tana French. When I originally read this book, it was when I was still in high school, like later years of high school. I can't remember exactly when it was, but I remember it was during the summer because I read it in 24 hours, basically. One day or so, I remember sitting there and just being sucked into this book. And Tana French has become very popular, especially on BookTube over the years. But at the time, I had no idea who she was. I was just attracted to the cover. I have since read The Likeness, which is the next book in the Dublin Murder Squad series. And then I have the third book on my bookshelves for a long time, and I still haven't read it. So I'm almost thinking I should reread In the Woods, hopefully enjoy it almost as much as I did originally, and then read The Likeness again, which I really didn't like as much. And I don't know if that's because it felt like a letdown in comparison to In the Woods, or if I just wasn't in the right headspace when I read it. I read The Likeness during my first year of university, so it was within a year or two of reading In the Woods, and yeah, I just didn't have the same feelings, so I want to start over again and see if I can get that momentum to carry me and then move on to finally reading the third book. Next, we have the Hunger Games trilogy. I have already reread this series once before. I originally read it in my first year of university. One of my, not my roommates, but we had like a suite set up. So I had an actual roommate that I shared a room with. And then I had suite mates, so we all shared like a couple bathrooms and a little like kitchenette area. And so one of my suite mates was reading the series and she convinced me to pick them up, and I was super into them. And I think at that point we knew the movie was coming out as well, so I was also interested in seeing the movie and reading the books before then. Obviously I loved them. And then I read them again in 2014 right after I graduated university, and they were still enjoyable, but I noticed that certain points of the book hit me differently because I knew the general storyline, but then rereading it and getting those little moments, different things stuck out to me. It is now 2021, and I rewatched all of the movies last year in pretty close succession, and it was such a great experience. The first two movies are amazing. I think Mockingjay Part 1 is better than you remember, and then Mockingjay Part 2 is kind of meh, but I want to reread the books and experience those again now that I have rewatched the movies all in a row and just had such a good time doing it. I am of the opinion that this is one of the best YA series ever written, so we'll see if I still think that after I reread them. Number 5 is A Mango-Shaped Space by Wendy Mass. I read this book a long time ago. It was originally published in 2005, I believe, and I read it at summer camp one year. I remember I was a bit older because I was in like the cabins for the older girls, so I was probably like 13, maybe 14 when I read it. It is about a girl that has synesthesia, which is where you associate like numbers and things with certain colors, and it blew my mind because I had no idea that was a thing. I thought it was so cool and so interesting to learn that in a book, and I don't remember much about the plot, but I remember learning about synesthesia and learning about what that was. And this was a book that I think is probably YA, but it was in that genre before YA was really a thing like it is now. Maybe it's a bit more middle grade, but I want to reread it and just see how I feel rereading it as an adult. I mean, it won't hit me in the same way because I'm a lot older now, but I could still enjoy the book and still look at it and recommend it to younger audiences who I think might really like it. Next is Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. I read this back in 2013. I do have a review of it on this channel a long time ago. I read this in pretty much one sitting. I was doing an exchange in Innsbruck, Austria at the time, and I was coming back on a train from Berlin. I had done a weekend trip with a couple of friends that I had made while I was studying there, and I was so sucked into this book on the train. Like, I did not want to stop reading. I think this is the book that really kicked off my love for nonfiction. I enjoyed nonfiction beforehand, but I think this was the turning point for me where I really started to realize that nonfiction was my favorite thing to read, and specifically this subgenre of people going through intense experiences or somebody doing some amazing feat, something like that. Just these books that really focus on a visceral, intense experience that these people go through and them writing about it or someone else writing about it on their behalf. I really want to reread it to see how it holds up now that I have read so much more nonfiction and my standards are a little bit higher. I want to see if it still sucks me in again, if I'm still as interested in how the story plays out. It's been long enough that I don't remember all the details. This is about the 1996 Mount Everest disaster, so it was an incredibly intense read, and even today the different accounts of what happened are disputed amongst the people who were there. So it is one of those things where we may never exactly know what happened, but it makes for a very intense read. We have another series again. I read The Golden Compass at the very end of 2019 with the hopes of continuing on to read The Subtle Knife and The Amber Spyglass. I read these books originally when I was about 9 or 10, so I knew that rereading them I was going to pick up on some different things that I didn't get previously. And I read The Golden Compass and it was okay. I didn't enjoy the experience as much as I wanted, so I haven't read these two books yet, but I wanted to add them to this list because I would like to finish rereading the series, especially because these two are just sitting on my TBR shelf looking at me, right? This is a very popular series, well loved by many. I really enjoyed it when I read it when I was younger, but now I'm not as much of a fantasy person anymore. Like, I can read it, but I'm not as into it as I was when I was 9 and 10. So I think that's part of the reason why I'm not enjoying the series as much as I remember, but I think I'm definitely picking up on some other things that I didn't get the first time. There's also the television show now, if I have any interest in doing that, but I think generally I just want to finish rereading this series and decide how I feel now about it. Another book on this list is The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. I read this in AP English, junior year of high school, and it is a collection of fictional stories that are centered around soldiers in Vietnam. So as far as I understand, it's sort of taken from different people's experiences, but fictionalized. And I remember really enjoying this because I think a lot of times with AP classes, the books that you read are generally older classics, you know, Shakespeare, things like that. And this was a very modern book in comparison. And I really liked learning about the Vietnam War through this lens. There are a ton of stories out there about World War II. There's a fair amount of stories out there for World War I. I feel like Vietnam can sometimes get overlooked because of all of the controversy around it. Like, not to say that there aren't books and movies out there that cover that, but I feel like it's talked about a little bit less, especially in schools. Therefore, being able to read this book in school really meant a lot to me. It really stuck with me for that reason. The second to last book on this list is the one I'm most nervous for. It is Girlfriend in a Coma by Douglas Coupland. I read this in high school and I remember really enjoying it at the time. I read it before I joined Goodreads. I joined Goodreads in 2011, which would have been right after my first year of university, like in that summer. I read it before then. I gave it 4 stars when I was marking books way back then, and it would have been a lot closer to when I actually read it. But I can't really remember much about the book. I just know that I really liked it at the time I read it, so I think there would be a lot of surprises, so to say, because I can't remember the plot. The thing is, reading the description on Goodreads, it doesn't really sound like something I would like, because it's about a girlfriend who's in a coma and some weird stuff happens because it's Douglas Coupland and his books are always like a little weird and out there. And that's just not really my genre anymore. But at the same time, I'm wondering if it's one of those books that still works for me even though it is kind of weird. Maybe, so that's why I'm a little nervous about this one. It's definitely not the top of my list to reread, but I still think it deserves a place on here. The final book is one that many of you will know, and that is Holes by Louis Sachar. I think this has got to be one of the most beloved books for those of us that got to read it when we were elementary school age. I have reread this book multiple times. I think 3 times. I feel like I read it on my own twice, and then our 3rd grade teacher read it to us. And I say our because Les and I were in the same 3rd grade class. We weren't really friends then, but we knew of each other. We didn't become best friends till later in high school. But I remember sitting on the rug during story time and having the teacher read this book to us and thinking, I've already read this book. So I think, yeah, it's 3 times at this point, and it's just one of those books that it seems like it holds up. I've seen people mention it here and there on BookTube in different contexts, and people are always commenting saying, like, I'm a teacher, I read this book to my students every year, it holds up, or like I, recently reread this just for funsies, for nostalgia, and it really does still work. So this is one that I really think it's worth keeping. I'm pretty sure that I still have it, or my sister has it back at my parents' house, so I don't necessarily need to buy a new copy of it, but heck, I would buy a new copy of it just to reread it. The movie, which came out when I was the perfect age to watch that movie, I also remember being really awesome, so maybe I should do a book to movie comparison of Holes. That'd be kind of fun. Alright, that is my list of books that I would really like to reread, some that I would love to get to in 2021, and some others that they're on my radar. You never know. Maybe I'll get to them this year, maybe not. If you're like me and you want to reread these books, or you have reread them, let me know down below. Let me know how that experience went for you if you did reread them. As always, all of our links are in the down bar. You can go check those out if you feel so inclined. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you later.